What is going on, ladies and gents? Welcome to VeVe Investments. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about different types of use cases for different collectibles on the VeVe app. So if you guys are interested, make sure to stay tuned. We discuss 17 points in this episode. So I've been trying to film a specific type of video, and that is different types of structures that you can build inside of in the VeVeVerse. Right now, I can't access collectibles that I don't own on the VeVe app on my mobile phone. I can do so on the web app, but right now, the web app isn't exactly, the most user-friendly when it comes to viewing collectibles. I'm finding that I'm just scrolling for minutes on end trying to zoom into certain spots. So I am going to substitute today's video for that one. Unfortunately, I can't create that until I have access on my phone. Now, as I mentioned, we're covering 17 points in this video, so let's kick it off with point number 1. So we're going to start things off with a pretty obvious one, and that is going to be racing vehicles. Now, I am actually thinking about this in two different ways. So a third-person perspective where a camera's positioned behind the car as you're driving it, but then also from a first-person perspective where you're viewing a miniature track from your avatar and you're controlling like a little remote control car. You use various land vehicles to race around a custom track, incorporate obstacles, and then you can use vehicles like the DeLoreans, the Lambos. We have Kit's Knight Rider, the Aston Martin. We're also going to have the James Bond motorcycle, the Ecto 1. At this point, we have, quite a few options on the app. Now, speaking of racing vehicles, we can actually do the same thing, but up in the air. You use various air vehicles to race around a custom track, incorporate obstacles like we mentioned in the first example, but this time use vehicles like the TIE Fighter, X-Wing, Hovering DeLorean, and then we have a few others as well. Next up on the list, I got the Locomotive. So in a similar way to creating a custom track, you can create a custom railway and tour different destinations on board the Locomotive. Now this would really only work if you can actually move the Locomotive. I don't know if there's going to be a drivability feature, or if it's only going to be a collectible that can remain stationary, but, on the ground or in the air. I would hope, though, that for a piece like this that has all the details that it does, that you can do more with it in the VeVeVerse. Next up, we got one for the Iron Man fans. You can pause Iron Man's animation while he is flying. So you can use his thrusters as a unique lighting decoration for your home space. Pretty much what you would do is warp his entire body into some sort of object. In this case, it would probably be a ceiling if you want to use it as a light. And then you only have his thruster at his feet exposed. So for those who are newer to the platform, or maybe you missed the unveiling, there is going to be a feature that allows you to pause animations on animated collectibles. Next up, you can use Boo's door as a door. Gee, did anyone see that coming? So I'm sure we're going to have various different options for doors, but Boo's door is just going to be another one. So you can use it as an actual doorway because it does open and close, but you can also use it for a game show. So think of something like Deal or No Deal, right? Instead of opening cases, you can open a variety of different doors. But I definitely think that this is going to be a piece that we see used in a lot of creative ways. Next up, we have a collectible that I don't think we've talked about on the platform yet, and that's going to be Darkseid. So you can actually pause his animation while he's shooting his lasers, and then you can use his lasers to mimic some sort of security system for an important room or collectible. So in a similar way with our point with Iron Man, you can warp his body into an object so that only his lasers are exposed. Next up, you can build a shooting range with Rambo. Place your Rambo down and choose your best spot. Activate his animation to shoot his arrow. And then if you guys are actually running a little contest, here's a point I haven't brought up about this yet. You can pause all their animations once they're done shooting their arrow to keep track of where the arrows have actually landed, if that makes sense. But I'm not really going to say much more there because we've discussed this point before. Next up, I think you're going to be able to do quite a bit with the base of Tarzan. So you can use Tarzan's waterfall as a unique feature that you can drive under on a racetrack. We've also talked about creating meditation spaces. So you can use the waterfall as part of this meditation space, whether it's a visual thing or whether it's an audio thing from the water actually falling. One thing I am quite curious about, and I think about it a lot when I look at this piece, is how big you can actually scale a piece before it starts to become a little pixelated, because you can do that in the showroom, but for anyone who hasn't done it before, the larger you scale it, the more pixelated it becomes. I assume the same thing's going to happen in the VeVeVerse. Next up, let's talk about Pili Fantasy Series 2. So the whole set comes with this swirling animation effect at the base of their feet. So what you can do is you can actually turn these collectibles on their side and use their swirl as a wall decoration in your home, or a ceiling decoration, or a floor decoration, whatever way you want to turn it. So the same way you use Darkseid and Iron Man, you warp part of the collectible into an object, leaving only the swirl animation exposed. Next up, I'm definitely doing this. I freaking love this piece, and it's probably the most nostalgic piece on the app for me now. But you can build a stage with a full production setup, lights and everything, and then script a feature that starts the animation and music when you enter the room or you get within a certain proximity to the collectible. And just to be clear, we know you can do this already. I've heard, I can't remember exactly who it was on the team. I want to say Dan. I'm not sure who else it would have been, but he had mentioned he had scripted a feature where once he walks through the front door of his home, it starts playing music. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this was the episode I was trying to put together, building inside of different structures in the VeVeVerse. I had a list of, I want to say it was 15 or 16 different buildings, so I'm not going to list them all now, because I do eventually want to do a full episode on it. But you can use various structures to build inside of, or you can use entire ships as building blocks. So I have some examples of those structures on the right hand side here. We got the Avengers Tower, the Up House. I would show you inside Cavernous right now, but unfortunately my free trial ran out. But any default shape that you ended up placing, you can actually walk into. So if I was to take like a cube and then just enlarge it entirely and walk into it, think about doing the same thing with the Avengers Tower. Now, speaking of that, you can use the Avengers Tower to play a little CTC, or capture the collectible. You have two towers, you have two teams, and then the first team to collect and capture the opposing team's collectible wins. I wouldn't really be able to speak on the details of how you would make this work until I actually get inside the VeVeVerse, but I would be quite surprised if this isn't possible. Now, we talked about pausing animation, so here's another one you can do that with. Pause Mr. Incredible's animation while he's holding the rock, and use him to hold other collectibles, or just objects in general. So buildings, you have the Up House, cars, maybe you want to position like an Aston Martin in his hand. And then the way you would make this work is that you would pause his animation close to a wall, and then put the object that you want him to hold in front of the rock, or just enlarge it big enough so that it's fully encasing the rock. Next up, we know we're going to have different lighting features in the VeVeVerse. I've already showed some of them in Cavernous. But if you want to get creative with things, use the lights from various collectibles to illuminate your space. So in this case, I got the Tinkerbell collectible on the right-hand side. You got the little light from the lantern at the top that you can use to illuminate part of your space instead of actually putting like a spotlight. Another example, we got Nedry's computer screen from the Jurassic Park drop. We have Pink Panther's spotlight. There's a lot of collectible with the Tesseract is another one now. But just like vehicles, there's quite a bit on the app to choose from that have lighting features. Okay, here's a bit of a unique one. Hear me out on this one. So in the original unveiling video, Dan actually paused the Dirty Trooper animation, and we saw all the pedals pause in the air. I thought of a couple things you can do with this. So one, you can turn the pedals into a platformer game, but again, that's only if you can jump. I still don't know if that's possible. But then you can also enlarge the piece so that it's big enough where the pedals can act as bases for your collectibles. And then it would serve as a really cool art display. Again, a little bit of a question mark on this one, but just some thoughts in my head. Now, I think something like this is inevitable, and that is going to be trading cards. So you can use various art as trading cards to qualify for certain things. Those certain things would be up to you. You can use Disney posters. We got the rewind cards. You can even use comic covers, right? Specific artist covers. There's a variety of different ways you can make this work. And then you could even take it a step further and create things like trading clubs or even games. Now, speaking of clubs, this is going to be the last point on today's list. And this is going to be another thing that I think is inevitable. Collectible clubs or comic clubs. To be fair, actually, we already have this in the community, but so similar to our last example, there can be different qualifications to enter your club. Maybe you own a specific piece. In this case, when I think of owning a specific piece to get into a club, I think of like a club space where maybe all the club members can showcase their qualifying collectible to get into the space with their mint number. Mint number clubs now come to mind as well. But think Harry Potter and the 4 different houses, right? Actually, speaking of Harry Potter, they released a game that shows this better than I can explain it. So I'll toss it on screen now. They have common spaces that are branded after each house, replicated after the movies, of course. But think about doing something like this for your club in the VeVeVerse. Maybe you have a specific artist club or a specific comic club, and you deck that space out with, you know, all of that comic branding or artist's work. So in this case, we're not talking about a specific collectible here. You can really do this with any collectible on the platform. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to conclude today's episode. I hope you enjoyed. Now, I am a little pressed for time because of the whole postponing our episode this week. Thursday's episode should still be dropping on time, but if there are any issues, I will make sure to update you guys via Twitter and community posts on YouTube. I will also be cutting our collectible showcases down to 1 per week for the next few weeks here. The reason why is because I'm working on revising a lot in the background. I got a lot on the go, a lot of projects I'm working on, and a lot of things that you guys can expect in the coming weeks for the channel. So I'm super excited to introduce them. And yeah, you guys got that to look forward to. But if you guys enjoy the content, make sure to like and subscribe. Comment down below what you want to see in a future episode. And as for our next, I'll catch you then.